My name is Tina Mary. I'm joining today from Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, and I'm really, really happy that you could all come join this session. Although I no longer work in the games development industry, the 15 plus years I spent working in the industry took me on a global journey that led to me finding my dream job last year. Who would have thought that in the middle of a pandemic? Today, I work as lead consultant for the Cultural Intelligence Center, and I help organizations and individuals improve their intercultural effectiveness through virtual training, coaching, consulting, and one-on-one sessions. So for our agenda, the primary goal for me is to share some best practices about navigating your career in the games industry, and that's where we'll spend most of our time in the agenda. But for context, I'll tell you a little bit about my own journey in the industry. And then also I wanted to wrap up with about 10 minutes introducing you to the topic of cultural intelligence and its relevance to this industry related to inclusion. So, are you a planner like me? I really like to plan. I like to make lists, and if I'm stressed or stuck somehow, I'm going to revert to making a plan. I came across the saying, begin with the end in mind by Stephen Covey, and this almost became a mantra for me. And early on in my career, I saw my career journey very linear for a super long time. My definition of success was very narrow, and it usually involved when was I going to get my next promotion and how much of a raise could I. And I stayed in the same industry for nearly 12 years, in the same role for 7 years, before I finally took a chance on myself. Once I decided to make that career switch, it was only a few years later where I saw this new pattern of reality emerging, and my career path started looking a lot more like the diagram on the right. My new roles, new colleagues, and being exposed to new ideas created opportunities I never realized existed. As some doors closed, more open. And there was no longer a career ladder to climb. It was like the Matrix, a cool place to explore. So I still do a lot of planning. I do lists, and I think a lot about my goals. But I'm much more comfortable being flexible about new options and opportunities and seeking out the new doors that we can open. So I started my own journey into the games industry completely by accident. I'd been laid off as the primary breadwinner for a family of 5. And so my priority was simply to get a new job. I made a list of the top 20 technical companies in my city, and I began to apply to each of them. Electronic Arts was one of those companies, and I was invited to join them in 2003. This slide represents a few defining moments. So as I mentioned, I started at EA in 2003, and my role was art production manager. Honestly, I will confess, I had no idea what games were about. I didn't understand about artists, and yet my role involved building a new team of artists to support a group of projects working on the PlayStation Portable launch titles. This was the first time in the organization that they'd started using what they called central teams, and producers and game designers were quite reluctant actually to give up control of the game design. So it was a very interesting way to enter the industry. After successfully setting up central art teams for 3D and UI art for that group, I moved on to a role at EA called Franchise Development Director, or Franchise DD. And in a lot of other game companies, you're going to refer to this role as the producer. It involved both line management of a lot of the engineers on the team, as well as accountability of the execution of the projects, who was going to do what, when, tracking schedules, and so on. I was taking on larger and more complex projects at this point, including leading up to the FIFA franchise flagship project. By this time, I'd become established as a fairly solid subject matter expert related to working with globally distributed and culturally diverse teams. And so in 2010, I got the opportunity to take on a new project where 50% of my team was going to be an external partner. I found that partner with a team in St. Petersburg, Russia, called Spirasoft. And it was an amazing experience, teaching me some of my deepest lessons about working across cultures. When that project was finished, I decided it was time for my first expatriate assignment. I asked for that, and I ended up for several months in Argentina. And then that became an almost 7-year journey for my husband and I, living in Romania, Sweden, in Canada again, in UK, and then relocating back to Canada at the end of 2018. In 2018, I was working with Activision, and that's when I came across the cultural intelligence, or the CQ framework. And I had a huge aha moment that I'll share more about later. This was when I invested in myself and I flew to the United States to become certified in the CQ framework. And it's ultimately what led to me doing this highly rewarding and interesting work that I do today as lead consultant and trainer. Okay, so that's enough about me. I really want to get into the primary session of the goal of this session, which is to make sure it's a good use of your time. First, I want to ask you to think about this question very deeply. What matters most to you in life? What's going to lead to happiness and personal fulfillment? Self-reflection helped me gain clarity to the point where I can describe my personal core values, what matters most to me, in 3 words. The first word for me is balance. This isn't work-life balance, but it is about health, wellness, and family, about emotional and physical fitness, overall well-being, and having the opportunity to participate in a positive work culture that allows me to achieve that degree of balance. Service is about making a difference in my world. It's about coaching, mentoring, volunteerism, and community involvement. The opportunity to give back is really important to me. And I respect I've been given a lot of wonderful opportunities in life, including growing up in a safe place with parents that love me. So service matters deeply in everything I do. And achievement. This is the competitive part of me, the getting it done person, being recognized, tangible outcomes, success and winning. This is the core value that drove me to achieve a level of excellence as a project manager and a development director in the games industry. And the key lessons that I learned as I reflected on these conversations with myself, and when I think about what matters most, is it helps me put filters on opportunities and apply focus in the areas of my life that are going to have the most impact on my happiness and my sense of well-being. I mentioned I'm doing highly rewarding work now, and a lot of that comes from being clear on what matters most to me so I could focus my energy in the right places in my life. So I want to ask you to apply that to your own context. Take some time to reflect on what matters most to you and apply this in the context of career development, because it's a very, very personal thing. What are your core values? Next, ask this, again, very personal question. What does career development mean to you? How do you fill out that blank board? Is it about getting promoted? Is it about taking on a brand new role? Maybe you just want autonomy and more freedom in the way that you work within your current role. Are you hoping to develop a brand new skill or master an existing skill and achieve a level of excellence? Perhaps you want to explore new cultures, try a new project or a new team. So we know what matters most to us. We're starting to get clarity on what does career development mean? What does that term mean to us? How do we want to grow our career? Now it's time to do something called mind the gap. Now, for those of you in the UK, you're going to recognize this is a very colloquial term. We hear this when we're on the underground subway and we hear a woman's voice saying, mind the gap, telling us to watch the gap between the subway and the train station. But in this context, I want to ask you to think about what are the gaps between the current state, where you are in your career now, and where you want to be headed. What does great look like? And once you start reflecting on that, ask yourself, is the gap related to skills? Is there a skill gap here that you need to address, either new skills to develop or existing skills to refine? Do you need a mentor? Should you take online training or coaching? How can you close that gap? The other type of major gap that you might find is an opportunity gap. Perhaps you have the skills and you feel competent and able to take on a new opportunity, and you just need to find a way to have that happen for you. So maybe that's asking for a special assignment, considering a lateral move to a new project or a new part of the organization. Think about volunteering and participating in areas that touch upon what you want to be doing. And most importantly, meet regularly with your manager to talk about these conversations and let them know how they can support you in closing those gaps. Okay, choices, choices, choices. The games industry has a broad range of functional roles or what we sometimes talk about as job families. And you can see some of them listed here, but it's certainly not a full list. If you're working in a larger game company, it's more likely you'll see specialists very much honing in and focusing on their specific crafts and areas. Whereas in a smaller studio, you might see more hybrid roles. For example, the producer and the designer being one person, or quality assurance and analyst. So as you develop your career in games, remember that moves do not need to be linear or ladder climbing with a career promotion. You might want to consider moving across to different within your own job family, or to a new job family, a new project that creates new challenges, gets you thinking about new things as you work with new people. Another method of making a transition to a new role is by taking on stretch projects and, again, offering to help out in an area new to you. Shadow somebody in a role that you're interested in exploring. At one time in my career, I was looking at making the move from development director to a producer role. And a large reason for that is I saw producers as being more, they were noticed more. They were more popular, so to speak. The development directors were just getting the job done. So at EA, this meant moving from a role focused on people and projects and execution to product and creative design. I interviewed a lot of people and I reflected on what matters most. And I actually realized I was already in the right job. Let me clarify. As we think about our choices, I discovered it can be really helpful to reflect on how do the different roles relate back to the core mission in the game development process. Then go back to your core values, what matters most, and what does career development mean to you? What provides energy? What interests you personally? Is this about what's being built? Does it excite you to think about who the audience is for and how you're engaging with them? Maybe it's about the beautiful visuals or the technology. Maybe you like helping the team set up efficient workflows, or your passion is with dealing with the excitement and the chaos of launch and live operations. For me, it gets back to how will we work? Service is a core value. So my decision was really, I love working on helping teams figure out more effective ways to collaborate and do beautiful things together. So I knew I was in the right job family already. Now, we've got some clarity on how we want to grow our career, what good looks like, what our filters for what matters most are. So now I just want to share a few tips for how to develop your career, that these can apply in virtually any industry. First, be visible. Make sure that you're building relationships at all levels of your organization and outside of your organization. And don't just network when you need something, please. Have specific, smart goals, specific and smart. So smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based goals. Think about short-term goals so you can tick them off quickly and feel like you've achieved something. Longer-term goals that will take you a bit more time, months or years to achieve. Talk about what you're passionate about. Share your passions about games, technology, and people. Your passion will be noticed by others. It will unlock new doors for you. Be open-minded and flexible about those options. You never know where new opportunities are going to appear. Make sure you keep learning. This is a moving industry. Find a mentor, take a class, read a book, do something to keep growing. And don't forget to take time to give back. Make sure that you take time to be a mentor and boost others around you. We need to lift each other up. I never would have achieved the success I've achieved in my careers without others supporting me. And then about balance. So without a doubt, working in this industry can be incredibly rewarding and highly demanding. And many of you have young families or other family responsibilities at home to deal with. How do we balance the challenges of working with this industry with those needs of our family and our personal lives? Balance is really personal. And for me, this changes at any given time and moment. Sometimes my work and career get more of me, and sometimes I pull back and I need to give more to my family and my home. Again, this is about working in a supportive environment that allows for that. So understand what balance means to you. Draw your boundaries. Part of the trick here is to know, again, what balance means, and then put some clear lines in the sand. An example of this is I used to book an evening class 2 days a week with my husband, and that meant that I had to leave on time at a certain hour from the office those days. Establishing your priorities. If you're really, really passionate or excited about a work project, it might feel great to put in the extra energy and work longer, harder hours and harder to achieve those goals. Talk to your family about supporting you through that, and vice versa. And then, of course, we know the games industry has crunch time and slowdown periods. So be flexible And remember that there's generally some degree of flexibility and predictability around when your project might need to have longer hours. So seek to balance this with time to recharge and make sure you're booking your holidays in the slowdown periods. And whatever you do take your holidays, please. I've seen too many people in this industry think that it's okay to bank their time off. This is not a good idea. Whether you're taking your weekends off or your statutory holidays off or your vacation days off, take the time to re-energize and get away from the work. And then, of course, COVID's created this big overlap between home and work. So taking time away from your physical workspace is very important. Because we're no longer doing commutes, one thing I have had recommended and I've been trying to do is to have a fake commute. So example, I might get up from my desk and go for a walk around the block. I might walk into a different room and meditate for 5 minutes. Do something to create a physical separation again between your workspace that might be in your home and getting on with your personal life. And now we're going to talk about cultural intelligence. So I mentioned earlier that my role today involves working with individuals all over the world to build more culturally intelligent leaders and orgs. So before we have some Q&A, I want to share a little bit more about why this is relevant to the games industry. First, let's define this term culture. The key point we need to understand here that it's about groups. So psychologists refer to it as a shared pattern of beliefs, values, assumptions, and behaviors that distinguish one group from another. It's also referred to as the collective programming of the mind, because culture is something we learn over a lifetime of experiences. It's not something we're born with. And another way to think about culture is that it represents the way we do things around here, wherever here might be. So it's the accepted and familiar rules and behaviors within our different social contexts. Now, we tend to think about culture in a very national context. So in that top left corner, where were we born? Where were our grandparents born? What's our ethnicity and our racial background? But what about the ways that rules change and culture changes across generations? Your grandparents' generation versus your parents versus your children's. In the workplace, Gen X versus Gen Y versus millennials have a very different way of being motivated and looking at life. Your house and my house might be in the same hometown. You might have the same ethnic background. And yet the rules in my house and the rules in your house might look very different because we have different family cultures. And then the school ground versus the playground, a classroom versus the playground, same group of kids, but the rules and the behaviors shift in those two cultural groups. And then in the workplace, if I look at Electronic Arts, we had a global studio. We had EA Vancouver versus EA Romania. At EA Vancouver, we had the culture of the FIFA team versus the NHL project team. And then in the FIFA team, we had the engineers versus the producers versus the designers versus the development directors. And each group had a different way of looking at things and working. So in all these contexts, again, we can say cultural diversity represents any group of people that work in a certain way. So now we can talk about cultural intelligence in that context. Cultural intelligence, also known as CQ, measures your capability to relate and work effectively in culturally diverse situations. And this is a form of intelligence that's been tested by academic researchers for over 2 decades. It's important to note that we can both measure it and we can improve it. It's a capability to develop and not fixed for life. Education, self-awareness, culturally diverse experiences, and coaching are all different ways that you can improve your CQ. And in culturally diverse situations, CQ is going to predict things like your ability to adjust and be adaptable, your judgment and your decision-making, your effectiveness as a leader. It also helps us increase levels of trust, idea sharing, and innovation within diverse teams. This is the CQ framework. Based on the research I mentioned, these are the 4 capabilities that consistently emerge amongst those who can be described as culturally intelligent. And they're actually also all part of managing bias. Let's take a look. CQ Drive is about our motivation to work across cultures. It measures our level of interest, persistence, and confidence during multicultural interactions. We need to consider CQ Drive when we're reflecting on who to assign to new projects or how to lead highly diverse teams. CQ knowledge is about cognition. This is our awareness of how cultures are similar and different, How might that show up in languages and behaviors and our view of the world? And how do these differences impact things like the way we share information, deal with project risks, or manage talent? And then CQ strategy is metacognition. It's our awareness and our ability to plan for those culturally diverse interactions, thinking about it ahead of time, showing that awareness in the moment, and checking for the accuracy of our assumptions that we made as part of our planning, whose voices were actually included, who wasn't heard from. And then CQ action is our ability to adapt our verbal and nonverbal behaviors appropriately when relating and working in multicultural interactions. We have full workshops and learning pathways to develop these at the Cultural Intelligence Center. If you want to learn more, please reach out. So how does this relate to inclusion? First, I want to share an experience. I mentioned to you I spent 15 years working in game dev, but I also joined the industry with a solid background in office management, recruiting, and business software project management. So despite that, I felt like I was constantly proving myself when I started at VA, especially in those early years. I would be asked things like, so what have you shipped? My first business meeting in the industry, about a week after I started, was that I found me at a table with 30 male colleagues. One other woman walked into the room, dropped off a jug of water, and then left. Introductions were not offered. I wasn't explicitly invited to speak in the meeting. Guess what? No surprise. I stayed really, really quiet. I'm quite an extroverted person, but I did not feel welcome and included. And so, although I felt special in that meeting, it wasn't necessarily special in a good way. So why does inclusion matter to this industry? Is it just the right thing to do? Let's go back to that CQ framework again and reflect on its relationship to inclusion and bias. We know that managing bias takes persistence. It's hard to work with people who are different than ourselves. So CQ Drive gives us the motivation to identify and confront bias. By developing our CQ knowledge, we can make ourselves conscious of our unconscious bias. And by understanding different types of unconscious bias, we can learn how to manage them. CQ strategy allows us to identify and reflect on everyday techniques we can use to disrupt bias systems, practices, and decision-making that can result in discrimination and ineffectiveness in our teams. And then CQ action can help us flex our behaviors to manage bias and mitigate impact. This is about moving from being passive bystanders to being active allies and advocates when it comes to addressing bias. So we find that with high CQ, we're less likely to act upon bias. We can control the application and choose not to behave in biased ways. So bias may be activated in our brain, and we all have it. We all have biases, but cultural intelligence helps us minimize the application of bias through intentional actions. It does help us make us more conscious of the unconscious. And just like when we learn any new skill, it takes a bit of time, but over time and with practice, it gets easier. So we might understand that bias has a negative impact on our ability to work as part of a diverse team, but what are some of the benefits? Creativity and innovation. This is key pillars to this industry. If everyone at the table has a shared viewpoint, in other words, there's a lack of diversity, are you truly going to be able to innovate in your games? What if people don't feel comfortable sharing diverse experiences and thinking patterns? If people don't share their ideas, ideas will not be heard. Diversity by itself will not translate into innovation and creativity. First, we need to minimize bias to allow us to foster inclusion and leverage those different perspectives. Hiring requires we're reaching out to potential candidates. How are you attracting talented employees? Unless we remove bias from the recruitment and talent management practices, we're going to lose out on great talent, both in terms of finding them and retaining them. And then multicultural effectiveness is essential in our global and diverse climate. We're building games for people all over the world. How can you achieve your individual goals and team goals if you can't effectively engage with different culture groups? You might realize your team members have a very different idea on how to get things done effectively. CQ is going to help you navigate those differences. And then in terms of staff and customer loyalty, more and more customers are speaking out against social injustices, and loyalty can be affected by bias. Why will your customer return if the service, product, or marketing is biased to one or more aspects of their identity? With high CQ, we can deliver outstanding experiences to our audiences and to our employees in a manner that makes everyone feel welcome, gives them what they need, and does it in a way that makes them feel respected. So I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to share this presentation with you today. And I will stop sharing now, and I'm very happy to take any questions. You can see my contact information in the window. Feel free to reach out afterwards as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Tina. That was absolutely excellent, so enlightening. And your voice is so smooth. I could listen to you read a phone book. We have some really, really insightful and great questions. So first, let's dive in. So from Marnie Lewis, for what matters most, are these things that fulfill you, or would fulfillment be an item on the list?
Are these things, oh, sorry, I'm going to go back and see. It would fulfill me, or would fulfillment? Oh, that's a great question. When I think about what matters most, I think about the types of activities or things that bring joy and energy and happiness to me. So if I'm giving back service, I get energy. I get it. It brings me joy and it brings me happiness. So yes, I think it's that those things on the list are things that fulfill me. When I can achieve balance, when I can reflect on service, when I have a strong sense of achievement and getting something done, that is what brings fulfillment to me. And I hope that answers your question, Marnie.
Excellent. And Vicky has almost like a follow-on question to that one.
Yeah.
So how do you go about reflecting on what matters to you? And do you have any key questions that you
ask? Great question, Vicky. There's a book. I'm going to type it into the Wearing My Heart at Conference Room D. Stan Slapp is the author. I think there's another subtitle. What it is it's a book that gets at the heart of the fact that leaders who live and lead by their core values are much more effective and powerful. If we think of strong leaders in history, we can very clearly understand their core values and talk about what they represented, whether it's somebody like Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa, or even somebody not so nice like Hitler. We know their core values. So this book talks you through that activity. And it was that book that I was given that led me to the conversation to come up with my core values. It takes you through a brainstorming exercise for yourself. So that would be one way to do it. What I did in the end was just reflect for a long time. I wrote a bunch of words down, and then I started realizing which words really resonated the most for me. So it was just not a long exercise, about a 1 hour exercise that got me there.
Excellent. Mandy Sido is saying, how do I find a mentor in the gaming industry? I'm looking for someone, but it is really hard for me.
Yeah, that can be a really tough one, Mandy. I would say understand what you're looking for a mentor for. So rather than ask for a mentor, look for, again, think about that gap conversation, and make sure you need a mentor and not a champion. So a mentor is going to skill you up. They're going to bring your skills up and help you develop new skills or refine your existing ones. A champion is going to help you find opportunities. So do you need a champion or do you need a mentor? And next, if you need a mentor, think about having a very specific goal in mind rather than approach somebody. And I've been approached many times, can you be my mentor? Know what you need to get out of that conversation. It should have a finite goal to it. And once you start having more clarity on why you want a mentor and what mentoring you're looking for, you might find it easier to approach very specific people with those skills and say, can I have some of your time? Can you help me with this? Or can you give me some advice? And then the women in games, I think there's a lot of women in games who are happy to give back. So again, if you put a posting on Facebook or LinkedIn groups and let this group know what help you're looking for, Mandy, I suspect you may have somebody willing to step up.
Excellent answer. Another one from Marnie.
Almost the opposite side of the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marnie, you have such a wealth of experience to offer, and I know exactly what you mean about feeling like an imposter. I've been public speaking and doing things like this for many decades, and I still get nervous and feel like, what right do I have to tell anybody what to do with their career? So I do understand, but really, I think I would put yourself out there. I would put a post on the groups or the places that and social groups that you're interested. Watch for posts like maybe Mandy will put out there and reach out and say, hey, I'd love to help you. And I've also been trying to do public speaking as well as another way to give back. But Marnie, feel free to reach out to me if you want to have some more brainstorming, some more ideas.
Excellent. And another question for Marnie, which, wowzers, how do you make CQ-based choices that reinforce diversity and cross-training rather than specialization and echo chamber effect within a group?
It's a huge problem. We have this urgency of filling positions to get the games finished, and it takes time and energy to work across cultures. So building a diverse talent pipeline and bringing diverse teams on board and then helping them work more effectively it takes intention. And I would say that's a lot of what my work is. It requires championship. That's the first step. You need to have somebody in the organization who champions the value of diversity. And then it's about taking intentional, culturally intelligent strategies to improve how you're bringing diverse talent into the organization and how you're developing it. As an example, at Electronic Arts, sometimes we would have opportunities for career development, going to an event, and you wouldn't necessarily hear about them. You'd hear about them kind of through the grapevine. So that wasn't a very inclusive way for people to be able to learn about opportunities, and they could have improved that. Another example would be how we interview for talent. We sometimes might be good at saying, well, ask these 5 questions and be consistent, but we're not defining what a good answer looks like. And so bias can creep into how we decide what a good answer is. Ultimately, we have to really challenge this conversation about culture fit and team fit and ask about the trade-offs between, as Marnie's saying, getting the job done and building a more diverse talent pool, and what are the benefits of doing that.
Excellent. Another fantastic answer. We have 2 more questions. So Michaela is saying, I find it difficult to understand how mentorship can influence your professional growth and what to expect.
I'm wondering, is the question from the standpoint of being a mentor or being mentored? I'm assuming it's being how mentorship can influence, because I think there's both sides of the coin. Mm-hmm. And is there any source of information about mentoring in the games industry?
From the perspective of being mentored.
Thank you for clarifying that, Michaela. I would say, again, it's being clear about that gap. It's really clear about what do you hope to get from the mentoring conversations or the mentoring relationship. Be very explicit about what career development means for you, what skill development means for you. Ensure you really need a mentor and not a champion, somebody who's going to help open doors for you. And I think that's how you're going to achieve success with having a mentor. Mentors also tend to be somewhat organic. You're asking a lot of somebody. So I found that most of my most effective relationships where I felt like I've had the biggest impact on somebody wasn't because they came to me, Tina, would you be my mentor? It kind of grew organically with the relationship. And so again, finding ways to help support and give back yourself will maybe have people more willing to want to help you if you're reluctant to just say, hey, put up your hand and ask for help. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Michaela. There are a lot of resources. Interesting, mentoring. I'm not sure it's so different across other industries, though. I think mentoring in general, there's a set of best practices that, especially in the context of virtual communications, that would be consistent across sectors.
Fantastic. We have, I think, a final question, and this is from Lucy. I'm dyslexic too, Lucy, so don't worry about it. We all make mistakes. Do you have any tips to tackle imposter syndrome? And it's such an important question.
I right before this presentation, I did the Superwoman pose. There's a huge power in self-praise. And so I'll give you a story. I tried to juggle for a long time, and I had a really bad experience where one time my Taekwondo teacher was trying to push us to juggle. And I was so angry one day, and he stood 3 inches from my face saying, how bad are you? And he was a 5-degree black belt, and I just kind of wanted to punch him in the nose. But I was so angry, I went home and I wrote on and I had been having these negative conversations with myself. Tina, you're so, you'll never learn to juggle. You're so clumsy. Oh my God, why can't you do this? And so I wrote on a piece of paper like Bart Simpson on the blackboard, Tina can juggle. Tina's a master juggle. Tina is juggling. And I did this because I remembered I had done it to quit smoking about 10 years earlier. And it worked. So I think your brain tricks you into believing what you're telling it. Kind of like when you smile and your brain begins to feel happier, it creates the chemicals in your brain to actually make you feel better, even though you might not feel better when you're fake smiling. It does work. And so I think the psychology here is if we write down positive intentions and statements, and I am great, I am worth it, I am in a role that I deserve, and make those positive statements, your subconscious mind is going to absorb it, and you maybe can start to overcome the imposter syndrome. That's what I've tried to do. I think it's helping. I still get it sometimes, I will confess. But I think it's, yeah, that would be my tip to offer for that one. I hope that is helpful.
And can you still juggle?
Yes, I can. My granddaughter just recently asked me that, and I started. At first, I did it with 2 oranges, and I dropped one and went, "Well, that was a bad idea." But then I grabbed my proper ones, and yes, I can still juggle. And I still don't smoke cigarettes. Yay!
Perfect.
So it works.
I think the last. Oh, hang on. So Marnie,
There's another tip.
Solution for combating imposter syndrome. Maybe you want to give an opinion.
Tip, remember, everyone isn't thinking about you. They're thinking about their own stuff, and they might even feel the same way you do. There's a great story about Neil Gaiman and Neil Armstrong chatting against the wall of an event, both feeling like they didn't belong there. It's something we do to ourselves. It's very true. I think the secret is to catch yourself in these negative self-talks and intentionally turn yourself around, even if you don't believe it. I am beautiful. I am smart. I am capable. I can do this. I'm going to knock it out of the park. Write it on a piece of paper. Say it out loud. Do your superwoman pose before that tough meeting. It will work. You are all amazing, capable women. I know.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. That was one of my biggest biases. In fact, when there's a concept called covering. Thank you for asking that question, Teresa. Covering is when we are reluctant to share an aspect of our identity, and it leads to a lack of inclusion in our industry. Because, for example, women might be reluctant to share that they have children at home because their team thinks like they can't be all in and work hard like the rest of the team when it's crunch time. And for me, that was an area that I had to cover. And another one was ageism. I did come into the industry with a lot of experience, and I felt like there was this sense of maybe I wasn't in touch. I didn't want to, I had to feel topical. And so I would say that we face that issue related to, as I mentioned, what games have you shipped? You know, we want people to come into this industry with experience, and yet people have to come with no experience at some point. Yeah, it was tough.
I think it raises a point of not just about females, but being from an older standpoint and trying to get into what is essentially seen as a young person's game.
Yes.
And how you can view yourself as still valid.
Exactly. The other thing that was fascinating for me, it took a few years to realize it, the games industry is actually fairly immature in business context and leadership context. So if we see, I came from outside of technology and public practice accounting and recruitment, very old school businesses. And then I moved into technology and software in a software startup and a little less mature. And then I moved into games and it was even less mature. So there is this evolving. It is interesting. I do feel like I bring a lot of life experience that brought value. What do you wish somebody told you in your early 20s? Oh.
So many.
Find a champion. That's probably the worst thing I didn't do. The biggest mistake I made is not understanding the difference between a mentor and a champion. And sometimes you need somebody who is advocating for you behind closed doors. That person who's going to say, this person is competent, they're capable, we should give Tina this opportunity. And I feel like sometimes I succeeded in spite of myself, in spite of not always having a champion behind closed doors. So a champion is somebody who sponsors you, and there's a great, actually, I'm going to give you a website that I love, leaderly.com. And she talks about champion versus mentor. And she explains that a mentor is somebody that levels you up. A champion is somebody that's, or moves you up. And so we tend in business to see women 5 times more likely to be given mentoring than they are sponsorship or champions compared to men. And that's a problem, because that means men are being seen as capable and competent and being given the opportunities, and women are being seen as needing to upskill. And so that is the key question. I would wish, and I wish I could pronounce that properly. Sierra, how do we pronounce that? Is that right? Sierra? Do you know? Kiara? It's beautiful. I love the look of it. And I think that's what I would have been. I wish somebody would have told me the difference between those two.
Okay.
Beginning of your career. Yeah. And don't be afraid to ask. My kids have learned this too. Don't ask, don't get. If you want an opportunity, ask for it. If you want to go take on a new expatriate assignment, I had to go put up my hand and say, hey, nobody was knocking on my door. Ask.
Definitely.
Well, it would be my honor to provide some mentoring for those of you who've mentioned something. I have a finite amount of time I could offer. If I know what you're looking for mentoring in, my specialty is production, project management, and the team side, talent management, working with diverse teams. So if there's a specific skill gap some people are looking for, maybe we can even set up a mentoring group where we can do some group mentoring. Let's get together and upskill each other. It would be my honor and pleasure if anyone's interested in setting something like that up.
What an absolutely fantastic offer. And I'm sure you'll end up with many.
Yeah. I've been meaning to do it for a while, actually. So maybe it's a monthly conversation we can have to share things.
Perfect. How does a champion work in a small studio or indie studio?
Great question, Edvig. And nice to see you here in this session. It's been a long time. She's calling in from France. And I would say that it's not very different. It's identifying who has the opportunity to be a sponsor or a champion. So it's who's got influence, who's aware of the opportunities, whose voice is going to count behind the scenes. Knowing who the people are that have the potential to be champions is the starting point. There just might be fewer of them available to you in a smaller studio. It's probably going to be your GM or your studio leader, maybe an operations director, somebody like that. What if we're interested in issue-based work as opposed to game-specific? I'm not sure I understand that question, Teresa. What do you mean by issue-based work? Yeah. I want to work in games. Oh, I see. Yes, I understand what you, I think I understand what you mean, Teresa. Your passion isn't around and mine wasn't necessarily when I got into this industry either. It definitely got into this industry because I liked working with people in project management, and not because I was a gamer. I've become a gamer over the years, but I'm still not what I would consider a hardcore gamer. My passion is Candy Crush. It's my little addiction. But that's a great reason to get in the industry. So I see no reason why you shouldn't try and get in there for that reason. Charlotte, regarding your question about cultures where they are against homosexuals due to religious beliefs, I think this gets back to knowing your own core values. And if this is a showstopper for you, that's probably an organization where you won't want to work. So I think, it's whether there are some areas of the world, obviously, where that's a more prevalent issue. And there are organizations where the organizational culture might, in general, have that prevalent attitude. I'm not sure there's anything you can fundamentally do about it if somebody has a really strong, unwavering value opinion on this matter, especially if it stems from religious beliefs. I might choose not to engage with that person or that company or buy that game because it was against my core values and beliefs. But beyond that, I'm not sure there's a lot more I can do other than make those choices for myself. I hope I've answered your question, Charlotte. Any other thoughts you want to add, Charlie?
No, I was just going to say that was such a good answer to what is a very difficult question, and a very tricky problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're absolutely right. You go by your own core values, and that's very important. So I think we have finished all of the questions. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Just thank you so much, Charlie and Lauren and Sharon. It's been brilliant being part of this event. The games industry is going to forever be part of my heart, even if I don't work directly in the industry again. And so I was really, really happy to have the chance to participate today. And again, reach out, anyone, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'm on LinkedIn, got my email. Say hi.
Thank you so much. That's been.
Thank
Oh,
you.
hang on. Daniela is. Oh, sorry, Danielle. How the industry is inclusive with women. Oh no, it's going too fast now. Inclusive with women who need to conciliate families, children, etc. Complementing
Yeah.
Teresa's question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I was fortunate because I had an at-home husband, Danielle. So although I had 3 young children getting into the industry, my husband was the one taking care of the whole household front. So I was able to work longer hours. But at the same time, I would say I've never been the kind of person who pulled in all-nighters, despite having been in AAA games for a long time and in very critical roles and projects. So the tough part, I think, is much more so with COVID. I don't even know how young mothers are coping. My daughter is in that place, and I feel so bad for her. Is the industry doing enough? Some organizations are, some are not. I think it's not an industry thing. I think it's an organizational thing. So it's something you might need to ask about in the organizations that you're seeking to work in or the one that you're working in. I don't get a sense that there's a strong, cohesive approach the industry as a whole is taking to address the unique challenges that families have, and men as well, because there's more and more men at home as well dealing with young families. So it's not just women, but yeah, we need to do more. I'm not sure that we're doing enough or that there is any standard approach to that. Thank you, Ruth, for your comment.
Again, another fantastic answer. So thank you so much for your time and for your early morning start.
My pleasure.